Today I'm pleased to be joined by Nicola Hall, who served in the Army from 2000 to 2005 in the 21st MP Company Airborne. And she was the first woman actually to serve in combat operations in Afghanistan. Welcome to the studio, Nikki.
Thanks, Shauna. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was just hoping that today we could kind of talk story. And
yeah.
I know you've brought in some photos,
yes.
which we've talked about going through kind of your process from before the military to some of the experiences that really stand out to you when you were in the service.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so let's start with maybe a photo or a story from before the military, before you went into the Army, early years, anything you want to share.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Ipswich, England. So it's a small little town on the east coast of England. You know, there with my mum, dad, brother, sister, you know, extended family, just a very kind of traditional upbringing. Like any good kind of English family, we loved football, and I was always out in the street playing football to whenever I could, English football. And my dad's American, and my mum's English, so I always had this kind of dual nationality kind of flavor on what I did. So even though I loved playing football and everything, my dad would watch American football. And so, you know, we had iced tea in our house, which, you know, in England you just don't have. So it was just a typical upbringing in that way. I think for me, you know, there was a couple of things. My dad was basically an Olympic athlete. He ran 100 hurdles, and he instilled that passion and that work ethic in me very early on. And when I was around 10, I started to show the signs of a good track athlete. And my dad quickly recognized that and started to grow that. So from the age of around 10, 11 on, I was running competitive track in England. And then by the age of 14, 15, I was the fastest hurdler in England. So I got to represent England in international track events. And I think it was at that moment where just being an athlete was very easy for me. I was the only girl on my school's all-boys football team. You know,
I didn't know that.
It was an interesting time, and my dad, he was hard on me with track, right? So we would, when people were sleeping or when people were resting, we were working out. Because
I was going to ask you about your training regimen. You know, what it entailed beyond maybe the regular school practices and things like that. What additional were you doing? So
I was part of a club. So outside of school, I was part of a club, and with that wasn't enough either, really. So my dad, you know, we would get up and run early in the mornings. We would go to the track and stay late at night, perfecting hurdling, perfecting that. The positions, the steps, you know, I would be home counting steps in between the hurdles, you know. And it was that work ethic very early on that I loved too, right? It was a motivation for me. And then just being healthy and fit and athletic was just something that was ingrained in my family very early on. So that was, you know, through high school, and I graduated high school, and my dad, you know, came home and told the family we're moving to America. And as you can imagine, for a 16-year-old who you know, I've got it all figured out. I understand life.
Every 16-year-old thinks
as
that,
we do, right? We know what's going on. We up and leave and move to Georgia.
Now, you brought a picture of something that you won a track meet there, it looks like. Is that in England, or is that after you came across?
So this is in England, and I have this picture because I think it best kind of represents the sense of me at that time. I was the fastest in England. I was, you know, I was the fastest in England. I had that kind of, I don't know what you want to say, confidence. You know, I was very confident in who I was and what I could do. And so I just thought that.
Done the work, you know.
I'd done the work, right.
And so I think about that, you know, as the warrior ethos is a lot of things, but that must have been the start of a piece of that. And I think about you and your dad, you know, he was an Olympic athlete, so being out there with you late at night,
Yeah.
perfecting these techniques, he would have corrected you
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
And you would have learned that's okay.
Yeah.
And we're together and just making me better at doing this.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So that piece too, I think, is kind of an important piece to note.
I agree. And even though at that time I didn't really understand what the warrior ethos was, I just knew that hard work,
Yep.
It may be painful.
Yep.
You may have to leave things behind, people behind, miss out on events that typically, you know, your friends the same age are kind of doing. I know I missed school because of some of my international track meets. But it was all worth it, and I saw the results of that, right? And so,
So
very
that kind
early
of pride was a kind of earned pride.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You had to work hard for it.
Yeah.
You know, hard work for all of that.
Yeah.
Even with school, the same thing. And so my parents really instilled that into me very early on.
And then you came across when you were 16.
Yeah.
Into Georgia.
Into Georgia.
What was that like?
So I don't know if there's two places on earth that are different from Ipswich and Georgia, but I may have found them. So moving to Georgia was an absolute culture shock for me.
Yeah.
You know, not only leaving my family, I'm very, very close to my grandma, and leaving her was a big thing for me. But then leaving just my safety network, everything I knew to be real about the world and life, and then coming to Georgia, where I had to figure everything out again, you know? And the one thing I did kind of cling to was track and field, and then soccer over here. And so I was able to, again, kind of rely on my athletic ability to find friends, to fit back in, to, you know, run track and everything else.
Okay.
And it was from that time at school I got a track scholarship.
Okay.
So I went off to college, and for me, even college was different because, you know, for most American kids, that's something that they think about their entire lives,
Right,
you know?
right.
I come over, I had no idea what a GPA was. Had no idea what a GPA was. Had no idea around kind of the college application process and all that. And so I just kind of dove right in.
Okay.
So I got a track scholarship and I went off to college. But it was very early on that when I was in college, about a year in, something wasn't right. I was running D1 track, but I wasn't happy. I missed home. I missed England. I was very homesick. And so I started to search. And I ended up talking to an Army recruiter.
Okay.
And, you know, I always think about what drew me to the Army.
Yeah.
And, you know, I saw the commercials. At that time, it was Be All You Can Be in like late 1999, 2000,
I remember
right?
that. Right.
And the fact of being part of a bigger mission, being able to kind of use my athletic ability to kind of, I guess, move me ahead or something that I could rely on, and then being part of a team just resonated with me. So I talked to a recruiter, and I decided to drop out of college, leave behind a scholarship, and join the Army.
Okay. Okay, and that takes us to basic training, right?
That takes us to basic training. As you can tell from this picture, so basic training, my recruiter told me before I went in, the number one thing always to do, keep, you know, just make sure that you're low key, make sure nobody pays attention to you, keep under the radar. Right?
Right.
And so I was like, all right, I've got it, I can do that. So, you know, going into MAPS and then going into basic training, I quickly realized that that was going to be tough. The main reason because my accent. I was very English back then. I have a pseudo-American English, sometimes Australian accent, some people think now. But, you know, it was, you know, keep on the radar, but I couldn't because of my accent. So we'd always have to call each other battle buddies, and people would make fun of the way I say battle, and they still do to this day. But it was in basic training where I realized my athletic ability was an equalizer, right? So when we ran, when we had to ruck, when we had to do anything athletic, whether it was push-ups, flutter kicks, whatever you could think of, that was all kind of too easy, to be honest. I had trained at such a level that coming back, leaving college, coming into the Army and training at that level, it was pretty simple. But it was an equalizer for me among men and women, and I think something that my drill sergeants recognized immediately was that, man, she's pretty tough, you know? So, yeah.
But not just the physical toughness. I mean, it's all that history, right, of training would have given you a layer of kind of emotional preparation.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that for a second? The experience of basic for you when you're getting corrected and shaped.
Yeah.
How that was given kind of your history.
Yeah. So I think for me, on the mental side of it, it was something that I enjoyed and I knew it was making me better.
Okay.
Right? So we always say, you know, you kind of enjoy the suck.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Right? When we were out there, when we were getting disciplined, when there was like the mass punishment for something that somebody else did, I enjoyed that. That made me a better person. I feel that made me a better leader. It built empathy, it built teamwork, right? I understood where it was happening. I could understand the end result. And I think people that struggle in basic training have or when they're in positions like that, struggle to see the big picture, right? And I think that's, you know, drawing on my past of hard work pays off, strong people succeed.
Yeah.
I brought that with me into basic training, so I knew the end result.
Yeah.
And as you can tell by my picture, I was kind of very happy being there too. So,
yeah, a little cheeky.
A little cheeky,
Yeah. I heard you got in trouble for that one.
I did.
Well and truly smoked.
Well and truly smoked, How dare you smile in your basic training picture? So,
and nobody else in the picture
Not one other
smiling.
Yeah.
They're all looking tough.
Yes.
Okay, so then next step for you is to go on to Fort Bragg.
Yeah.
So what's the next transition and how did that go?
Yeah, and you know, I want to very quickly step back to basic training because there's one incident in basic training which stuck with me.
Okay.
So I had very hard drill sergeants, right? They prided themselves back then at being tough as hell, you know? And so I had one specific drill sergeant. I remember we were out on our FTX, which is kind of the culmination of your basic training. And he ran into our tent and woke us all up.
Okay.
And he said, "The chopper's leaving in 10 minutes. We got to make it to the DZ."
Okay.
And we were, you know, what's going on?
Yeah.
And he had simulated an experience for us of where we had to kind of rock up and down this hill, sprint up and down this hill to make this, you know, pretend exfil of a helicopter leaving a drop zone. No other platoon did this, right? He did it for us. And you know, I had a overweight private on my squad, and we were having to hump up and down the hill, and we had to go back and get him and kind of pull him up. But it was that time he put me in charge of that squad. He put me in charge to make it to the DZ in that time, and it was that exercise that instilled kind of this feeling, right, that I could kind of do anything, and it was I guess it was my responsibility to be as good as I could for the men that were with me.
Okay.
And it's such a random incident in basic training, but still to this day, I kind of thank him for that exercise because it was so hard. At that point, it was probably the hardest thing I've ever done, to run up and down this very muddy hill with all your gear.
Yeah.
But it was kind of a game changer for me.
And that's big picture stuff.
Yeah.
That's why you do all the training, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And there was a vote of confidence in his picking you to lead that charge.
Exactly, yeah.
What do you think he saw in you? Did you have any interactions with him? Was it the athleticism or other things that came out during basic?
I think so. I think it was that, and plus I just wasn't fazed, right?
Okay.
So if I was getting smoked, or if I was getting punished, or if we were tired, I didn't complain, right?
Okay.
They probably could tell I could kind of, I got it, right? And I was kind of enjoying it, so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so off to Fort Bragg. And immediately I was put into a unit with tremendous leaders. And I worked with a lot of people, and I've worked with a lot of people since. And the men there that were my immediate leaders changed my life.
Okay.
You know? They saw in me a person. They saw in me a person, right? I wasn't a female,
okay.
Or a weak female coming in. I was a value-added member to the unit, and I better show up, and I better be able to keep up, carry my stuff, and that was what they taught me very early on.
So you didn't, and this is something I know about you, but I really want to emphasize it. You didn't want different standards.
No, not at all.
That would have been just important to you.
Yeah.
Like you wanted to be held to that same standard.
Absolutely.
And these leaders that you connected with at Fort Bragg saw you as a person, as a warrior in training.
Yeah, yeah.
So you didn't really feel the sort of different treatment from being a woman in this scenario.
No. I had one of the hardest platoon sergeants.
Okay.
And, you know, when I went to the company, they were like, oh, you're in that platoon with him. And so I was worried, but very early on, you know, he'd always have a big old chunk in and spit in my foot sometimes, you know, or trying to reach the trash can, you know, and he pulled me aside and he said, you need to be able to keep up here to fit in. And he's like, no excuses. And I appreciated that because it was a motivator to me. I was like, absolutely, right? And so whether it was mandatory 12-mile ruck, I was humping 80 pounds and I was making it within 2 hours, right? Like everybody else, right? Whether it was the run, whether we were jumping, you know, I was jumping the full weight, I was jumping my full gear, and there were no excuses. And so I was fortunate to be around a team that allowed me, like, emphasized that, right? They didn't look at me any differently. They didn't treat me any differently. I was just whole. I was just part of the team.
Did you go full G.I. Jane in that?
So going to basic training, I went full G.I. Jane.
Yeah.
I shaved my head and I went in. I kind of went all in. But you know, when I went to Fort Bragg, kind of that was, although I hadn't seen the movie, I don't even know it was made then, but like that was my mantra, right? Is that I can do this as well.
Yeah. Did the guys treat you any differently?
So the one thing about being in an MP company is that we have a garrison mission. We also have a combat mission. So, you know, we'd always laugh that we weren't considered infantry and everything else, but we would be, you know, just as forward as they would be, right? Like securing the routes, like taking prisoners and things like that. So we always had these dual missions. And so my MP, my military police leadership, I think from years and years before, were used to women kind of being in those roles, right? And being part of their teams. But yeah, I was not even with my kind of peers, I was never really treated any differently. And I think it's because they saw that I was keeping up.
Yeah. And that platoon sergeant that you mentioned, did you have a picture of him and you doing push-ups? Is that the same person that I'm thinking of?
Yeah.
What's he saying to you in that picture when he gets down on the ground with you and he's like, Hall,
he's giving me a quick smoking. Yeah. And so I made a mistake, and it's like, Hall, get down and drop. But then he got down and dropped there with me.
That's what stood out to me.
Yeah.
It's like, that usually doesn't happen in the stories that I'm told.
Yeah.
That they get down and do it with you.
Yeah, and that was the kind of leader he was, right? Yep. All my leaders in that way would endure the suck with you. Yeah. And I've been able to take that with, even in my job now, right? Yep. Being able to, we will endure together, right? I may be leading us through this, but we'll kind of do this together. Yep. And that's where he's doing the push-ups with me.
Yeah, I definitely want to throw that picture in.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so then that takes us,
So the other
any
thing,
more stories from Fort Bragg?
So the big thing with Fort Bragg is the up tempo, right? So Fort Bragg, we're at 18 hours, wheels up, 18 hours anywhere in the world, right? And that's the way that we would train, right? We are the leading edge. We will go into any battle and we will be first. And so very early on, that is the tempo that we train to, right? We would over and over again get up, practice loading a bird, getting taken off, practice loading our trucks, you know, emptying connexes, you know, missions out in the field, you know. That tempo was something that I was very grateful to go into because we trained every day for what was to come. But at that time, the only thing we thought of was kind of our peacekeeping missions in Kosovo, right? That was what that era was at that time. Yeah. The conflict was at that time.
So that drill that you did in boot camp was really on point for what you ended up
Everything kind of built into.
That's what I'm hearing. That it kind of made sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we're going to, your cherry jump was.
Oh yeah.
So we can't. Yeah. Here's that story.
Yeah. So, you know, I was unfortunate. I don't know where these
And you
pictures
can
went.
pass me the stack while you're talking, because
Yeah.
I'll recognize it.
Definitely. I don't know where it went, but it may be in there.
I'll find it while you're talking.
So I unfortunately went to Fort Bragg without any wings on my chest. So the way that, basic training lined up to,
Yep.
So the way that basic training lined up was that I left basic and AIT and went straight to Fort Bragg, and I missed airborne school. So I had to be at Fort Bragg for a few months without any wings on my chest, which is an absolute disaster, right? So I got a lot of flack for that. Like, how dare you be a dirty, nasty leg in our unit, right? And all I wanted to be was airborne. All I wanted to be was a jump master, right? So then when I finally got my wings, you come back and you get something called a cherry jump or a cherry blast. And so for me, you come in, you've all your old school BDUs, you have a cherry pie from the gut truck, right, in every pocket. They give you a ballistic helmet with a stem, and you take your first jump on Fort Bragg, because what they always say, the 5 jumps at jump school don't count.
Okay.
Right? Soft landing don't count, right? You've got to get on the real drop zones with trees in the way and everything else. So that was my cherry blast, and it was fun up in the bird. They're messing with my static line.
What's a static line for people that aren't familiar
Yeah,
with?
so the static line is part of the parachute that actually connects you to the airplane. And with a static jump, you jump out, and when the static line runs taut, your parachute comes out. So they took my static line off.
So you'd be dead.
Yeah, I would be dead, yeah. So they took it off and flapped it over my shoulder and said, do you need this hole? And I'm like, but it was all in good fun.
Did you kind of know they were messing with you, though?
Absolutely.
Imagine,
Absolutely, right? I'd seen it happen, or heard of it happening before. And it was just, this is the rite of passage, right? Get through this cherry jump, and it was
What was the
great.
test? Like, what were they actually trying to assess or test?
You don't lose it, right? That you can handle it, that you can do it.
Yeah.
And for me, it was all good fun.
And maybe you trust them not to kill you.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
Okay, so now we're on to Kosovo.
Yeah. So then we went to. I have some pictures here of Kosovo.
Okay.
For me, going to Kosovo was the first time that I had ever been to a war-torn country, right? So if you ever go to Kosovo, and I'm not sure what it looks like now, but then in 2000, it was a beautiful backdrop, right, with blown up buildings, right?
Yeah.
I would see kids with, amputees and just this terrible kind of just war-torn towns, and it was something that hit me very strongly. More so, I had a reaction in Kosovo than when I went to Afghanistan. It was my first kind of jolt, if you will, of reality of the inflict and the just war, right?
What was that moment when you came into that space and were just amazed that it was just different?
Yeah, it was. I always remember, so I was a driver, so an MP unit we kind of run as a gunner, a driver, and a team leader.
Yeah.
I was a driver, and I had switched, I call him my baby brother, but I switched with my baby brother up into the turret for that day, and I was up there and just taking it all in.
Yeah.
And seeing these kids just with missing limbs, and these mothers, and, them living in a tiny piece of their blown up kind of brick stone house, with no roof. That really impacted me.
Yeah.
While we were there, one of our units uncovered another mass grave. So it was just all of this was just, wow. This is what we've been training for, but just being able to, that jolt of taking that in.
Totally. Yeah.
But this was in Kosovo was, the real time that we got to kind of do this for real. But it was still a peacekeeping mission,
Yeah,
right?
and you have a picture somewhere in there that I would recognize if you
Is it
want me
this
to try
one?
and find it.
And so what we would do on mission, we would run patrols throughout the country. We would then go on cordon searches, and basically what we knew is that they were caching weapons, and then what they would do, they would send them from town to town to town, and we would go up and observe and we knew the signals, the lights come on, we're like, oh, they're moving the weapons down. And so we would run these searches. That picture there was one of my team leaders. He was an MP, was SRT trained.
Okay.
And he taught me how to clear, a building and look for, weapons and things like that.
Is that search and rescue? Is that the acronym, or what's SRT training?
It's Special Reaction Team, so it's a military police special reactions team. So that's what he did kind of in garrison, and so he was able to train me on how to do that, in Kosovo. So that was, my first experience kind of doing that, being part of a unit and really going out and having I felt like the real MP job.
Yeah.
So we would run patrols all across the country. I have a picture here of my team, and so this was the team that we would go out, and it was actually out on patrol. We came in that morning, and I remember parking and going into our hooch, and people would just crowded around the TV, and the towers are falling, right? It's 9/11,
right?
And so that moment for me was really powerful, and I know it's powerful for every American, right? But for me, as somebody that is now in the U.S. Army, still a little bit struggling with my identity, right? I'm a dual citizen, so I'm American and English, but I sound very English. I grew up in England, but it was this moment where I saw the towers fall, that something clicked inside of me, and I was like, I am absolutely an American. You know, it was a very powerful moment for me.
Yeah.
And for us as a unit, everything changed.
Yeah.
The way that we went out on mission in Kosovo changed. The way that we trained changed. We knew there was something bigger coming, and it was just a matter of time. There was
a new urgency.
Absolutely.
To everything you were doing.
Absolutely.
A relevance.
Exactly.
Yeah. What did people think was coming? Did they talk about it, or?
Yeah, we talked about it all the time.
Yeah.
Right. We knew we were going to war. We knew we had to. We knew there was something bigger coming, right? Because of what had happened to us, and so it was palpable. You could feel it. There was. Rumors flying that we were going to be redeployed right away so we could deploy. And so we were just on edge and waiting. And there's that scrutiny, right, on what we were doing. Doing it right was even more prevalent.
Yeah, that big picture again, comes in. And then any more stories from Kosovo, or should we go to your initial deployment to Afghanistan?
Yeah, we can jump into Afghanistan,
Okay. Because your role kind of changed and ratcheted up.
Yeah, actually the one item in Kosovo that I'd like to hit on is this picture. It seems kind of random, but it's me with a local national, and you can see I'm carrying an M249, which is a weapon. It's a larger weapon than typically what an MP driver would carry. So typically we'd carry an M4. But this is one of those tests, again, that my squad leader was like...
Can I see it?
Yeah, absolutely. You want to, Hall, I'm going to test you again. You're not going to carry an M4. You're going to carry an M249. Yeah. It's much heavier, but that's what you're going to hump, miles and miles across the Kosovo country. So, but again, it was a test. It was something that I embraced, and it was something that I was thankful for, and, I did it, right?
Yeah.
There was no complaints.
It also runs interference against anybody kind of treating you as though you can't.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So by doing that, it's a kind of interesting form of protection.
Yeah.
Because if you don't get those challenges, then there's always, maybe for some people, this open question of, is she going to be able to hang with us?
Yeah, exactly.
If you go beyond what the expectation is, then people kind of can accept.
Yeah.
We can count on her. She's got our back, and we're a team.
Yeah.
So I totally get that. Now, then you headed off to Afghanistan.
Yes.
And you've described to me how, again, kind of at a deeper level, there was kind of this, for all of you, initial naivete about what was actually on the ground.
I think we went in actually on a C5, which typically we didn't travel on. Okay. But I remember them saying quite vividly, we're in the airspace, red light only, and it was pretty bright, and everything just went dark, and we just had the red lights on.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, this is it, here we go, you know? And then we land in Kandahar, and really I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if we were going to get off and there was going to be bullets flying or whatever. But, you know, we landed in a secure base, and we started to do kind of base operations, right? So
when the lights went off, before you just have a question about that, when it went to red, was that a private moment for you, or did you connect with your team in any way, or look at others next to you and really recognize it in any communal way?
Yeah, I think so. A bit of both.
Yeah.
So I remember looking up at my team that I had. So one big actually item that I forgot to mention. So before in Kosovo, I was recognized as the soldier of the quarter there. So I have a picture of that too. But I was able to be. This is me, soldier of the quarter. This was. You know, a pretty successful deployment for me. And so my leadership recognized that I knew what I was doing, and they promoted me to corporal.
Okay.
And so corporal's a funny rank because you're still an E4, but you're an NCO.
Okay.
So you become like the go-to NCO for everything that needs to be done. Because I'm not an E5, I'm still an E4, but I have stripes. But I was very proud of making corporal rank because nobody else had made corporal. And they saw a difference in me to give me NCO stripes. So that was a big thing. So going into Afghanistan, I had a team that I was responsible for. I'm leading a team. I'm responsible for their lives. They're both married, right? They both have kids. So that was a big pressure for me, a 21-year-old kid, right? I'm responsible for these two men. So I remember when that red light, it was a powerful moment because it became very real, right? Here we go. I don't know what I expect. I also have these two dudes that I'm responsible for,
right?
For the first time ever. So yeah, it was a moment, right? And it's hard. I don't know if other veterans feel the same way, and maybe because I've been out for a while, but there's memories that become very mixed and muddled for me, right? There's moments that I can remember. The best thing I remember about my deployments are the smells. I smell jet fuel, it will take me back.
Brings you right back.
I smell, if I'm out in the farmland out here, it takes me back to Kosovo. Like, I smell bread, like raising in an oven. It takes me back to Afghanistan.
Not just you.
Okay.
The olfactory sense is very
it's so much more vivid than
primal.
Anything else.
It will take you right back into that. Yeah.
But there's these key moments in my deployment, and the red light is one of them, where I'm like, here we go. And you kind of strip, right? You kind of just take off things that are back there. Like, I worried about my mum a lot because she worries about me all the time, still today, you know, but you have to kind of like strip that off, right, when you were going in. And I think kind of that's like a moment probably for everybody.
Have to sort of quickly transform and get yourself into that role of soldier now.
Exactly.
Yep. That's something that would be interesting to talk about maybe some other time, about that connection with your family and how you can love them and hold them, but also have to, for a time, play that role, you know, and how we re-engage with those we love.
Exactly.
So you land in...
And so Kandahar is very primitive at that moment. Like, now I hear stories of this bloody Starbucks or whatever there, but at the time in 2001, 2002, there was nothing there. So I remember, like, our first few weeks, we were filling HESCO bags, and we were pulling base security and at the gate. And, you know, there was definitely a sense of, you know, being here and being part of a bigger mission, but I didn't really understand what it was.
Can I find it?
yet. The one picture. I'm hoping it's in there. I've got like 1,000 pictures out.
That's all right.
I think, is it that one?
Yeah.
So this is me, you know, secretly smoking a cigarette because I don't think we were allowed to up at the gate, but we would secretly do this.
Statute of limitations.
Exactly. I think it's done. I think it's over with. Now. But, you know, we were, this is me kind of up at the gate, pulling gate security, and just kind of not, you know, it's kind of a swagger, like, we've got this, we can do this. And and then things started to change for me there.
Okay. So you had some stories from Afghanistan that you were going to share.
Right. And so I think, for Afghanistan, the biggest part was, we're in country and the infantry are running a number of missions across the country.
Right.
And they're coming up against the issue that the local national women are hiding weapons, intel, even people within their clothes. And so what they needed a female to come with them to be able to search them. And so, as my first sergeant will tell me the story, they called up the MP unit there and said, I need a high-speed female to come out with me on mission, somebody that will be able to keep up.
Yep.
And so he told me, he's like, you were the only one. We immediately knew it was you, right? And so when you think back of everything that had brought me up to this point, all the hard work, not being treated differently, led to this moment.
The background in track and field.
Yeah. And so I remember getting called over, and two infantry guys walked over and said, gave me a couple of pills, which were blood thinners, and said, we leave at, 10 o'clock tonight, be ready. And so I packed up my ruck and I went out on my first mission with the infantry. And my role was to go in with them on this combat mission, and go in and into a compound. And once we had kind of searched, I would then search the women.
Yep.
And on my first mission, I'm finding weapons, I'm finding passports of high-value targets hidden on the women.
Okay.
Everything from them hanging them from their bras, from cord, under their armpits, everywhere.
Right.
And so as an MP, we were taught very early how to search people, so that was something I knew how to do. But because that mission was so effective and I was able to find so much stuff.
Turned up a lot.
They were like, we need to now bring you into our unit,
You became an asset in that way.
Exactly.
Is that where the term lioness comes from, or is that a female in combat?
I don't know. I've never really embraced that lioness term, to be honest, but maybe, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I don't really know the origin of it either.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got pulled into other patrols and missions.
They came back to my unit, back to my first sergeant, my company commander, and said, we need her to run combat patrols across the country.
Yeah.
So I was redeployed to, at the time it was called Stormy, and it changed to Salerno Fire Base, or Forward Operating Base. And I was out there and I showed up, and the infantry guys, I think, were more weirded out than I was. I was comfortable training and sleeping and next to men and eating next to men, and that was what I had done for years beforehand, right?
Yeah.
That's what I had done in my unit. But for them to see a female come in, they were a little standoffish, you know.
So it was their culture that you were moving into, and it was fine for you. It wasn't too much of an adjustment, but for them, they didn't probably quite know what to make of you at first.
Exactly. You go around, there was only a few tents up at the time. We slept outside. There were the urination tubes, right, for the guys to pee in, and there was nothing for me, but I was just fine squatting and going anywhere because I'd had to through my deployment to Kosovo. You know, when we were out in the middle of the Kosovo countryside, I'm sitting, I'm dropping, I'm going to the bathroom right there in front of it was not a big deal for me, right? And so over time, they got comfortable with that. And so I was running combat patrols with them, nightly patrols.
Did they trust you? Because that's a different question. You know, there's the comfort with having a woman in their space and kind of that awkwardness, I guess, that cultural disconnect. There's also that level of trust that you could be part of the team and be an asset. Did they extend that trust to you immediately, or
Eventually.
did you have to? Okay, so what was the story that you remember most, where you felt like I have moved forward and earned some of that trust with them?
So I think it's a couple of things. One, when we would go out on mission, a lot of the times we would have to hump miles and miles and miles to the target, right? So over the Afghanistan mountains, and I know we can kind of run the loop of those, but a very high altitude, right?
Right.
And so at the beginning, I would have guys come back to me while we were on patrol and say, do you need me to carry your stuff? Do you want me to? And I would, absolutely not. Move out, I'm good, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think that they started to say, oh, she can carry her stuff.
Yeah.
She's doing everything she needs to do. I don't need to help her in any way.
Right.
There was that,
Okay.
it was a very quick equalizer for me to say, I don't need any help.
Yeah.
I can hump this as long as you can.
Yeah.
I can sleep out here outside in the cold every night.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
And so even with the company commander as well, he would then, at the beginning, he was also worried about, we've got the female, is she all right, check on the female.
Special needs.
And then, and then that stopped,
Yeah.
right? Just get whole, make sure she's on mission, you know?
Yeah.
And then when I redeployed back out of Salerno back to my MP unit, and when they still had to run these one-off missions, he would call for me by name. He would ask for me by name because he knew I understood their culture, and I never had any issues.
Yeah.
And I know we hear stories about, various different things, worries about women in combat, my thing has been, as long as you don't change the standards for women, they need to do exactly the same as men. They can hump everything that they need to do. There isn't any decrement in our readiness and our lethalness.
Yeah.
And absolutely.
Yeah.
And hopefully that's what I showed those men. And very quickly I was brought in as part of the tribe. I was part of the unit. And
now I've heard, Nick, that some women are actually pretty adept at shooting skills.
Yeah.
That they have a natural propensity for accurate shooting.
Yeah.
Is that a rumor or is that true in your
I
experience?
don't, I'd have to say 50-50 from the women that I saw that I would shoot
Either
with.
you did or you didn't.
Yeah. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Unfounded so far.
Unfounded,
Maybe a provocative possibility. So you didn't feel that real disconnect and you found your way as a member of that tribe.
Yeah.
You did feel it a little bit later. So there's a few things I want to make sure we get to.
Yeah.
There was an incident where there was a woman who had a grenade on her. I want to talk about that.
Yeah, I think when you talk about what was the incident when they trusted you, and I think this may be the kind of culminating incident. And I have these pictures because it happened here. And I'll never, again, one of those memories that are seared that you never forget, right?
Yeah.
So I came up with a process now. I'd gone on, I don't know, I lost count how many combat patrols we were going on. And I'd go in and I would immediately move the women. Why? Because the women were hiding things. I knew where they were sitting. They were waiting for us, right? And they would sit on weapons, they'd sit on whatever. So my first thing was to up and move them in a strategic way. And from that moment on, I would know what I was dealing with. If things start clanking to the floor, I'm like, oh, here we go, right? I'm sitting on a gold mine.
Yeah.
So I moved and I watched this one woman and she was acting weird. And so I kept my eye on her and told my interpreter, watch. And when I would search the women, I would have a search team, a security team with me as well, because while I'm searching them, of course, I'm vulnerable, right? And so they would pull security. And I told one of my guys, I was like, watch her. And then I remember turning and looking, and she reached in, and I always forget, it was an old Russian kind of pineapple grenade. And she pulled it, and she went to pull the pin, and so I had to quickly disarm her. And so that was an incident that we all kind of looked at each other and was like, holy hell, what could have just happened there? It was within the blast radius, there was 15, 20 of us, right, to include local nationals. So that to me, it was one of those moments that you never forget. But then also, I think with the men that I was with, they were like, she's got our back and she's no joke. From that incident, I redeployed back to Kandahar to be with my MP unit. One funny quip before I did that, while I was out on mission, we didn't have food, we'd eat local national food, hopefully there would be a heavy drop, we'd get stuff in. There was a great cheer when Skoll heavy dropped, a bunch of cherry dip, people got crazy. But I lost close to 20 pounds, right? Just running missions night after night. And I remember going to Kabul and going up to one of my squad leaders in my company and saying, hey, B, I'm back. And he was like, who are you? And it's Hall. And I was so skinny and he didn't recognize I was filthy. While I was running missions out in Afghanistan, in all my pictures, you'll see my uniform sterile. The reason being no name tags, nothing, because there was a lot of focus on me, on this female being out there. So they didn't want any identifying kind of, badges, name or anything so people could see me.
Yeah.
The other item is that usually when I would run or go on, we would just call presence patrols.
Yeah.
I would cover my face. One, to protect me because there was an interest in a female being in an infantry unit.
Yeah, you said they were kind of mobbing you.
They would try to mob me. Yeah.
Come and just...
The local nationals would want to touch me.
Touch
they would
you,
try to feel me. And so I would try to keep myself covered so I looked like a man. And so they wouldn't...
They wouldn't identify you.
Identify me,
sure.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I took a picture with, some of the local nationals there, but yeah, it was definitely an interesting experience.
So then when you came back, let's skip ahead to when you came back, because there's a couple more things I want to hit as we kind of are wrapping up. The first is when you did feel like you had to prove yourself as a woman, because that actually came later in your term of service, in an environment where you hadn't been in infantry operations. So I want to hear about that story a little bit, and then about how you're paying it forward now.
Yeah.
What you're doing now that...
Yeah. And can I also touch on the SF item?
Yeah.
Okay, very quickly. So, after after I was redeployed, I also went on missions with the Special Forces, both Canadian Special Forces, our Special Forces, to run kind of similar missions, right, for them. Searching women on combat missions. And that was, again, when I would think back of where I've come to now, I'm with a Special Forces unit running missions over Afghanistan. It's a moment of reflection for me to say, anything's possible, right?
Yeah.
Again, it's similar. I came off the back of a Black Hawk, coming into Kandahar. I had a black balaclava on. I remember walking by one of my old sergeants saying, "Hey, Sergeant," and he was like, "Oh, is that you?" And it was like, "Yep, it's me." And so it was a crazy, kind of crazy time. So coming back, this is early 2003. I go to Korea, and I'm in a unit now where Iraq has just kicked off, and I'm in a unit with brand new, whether they're soldiers or soldiers that they've never been to Fort Bragg or a high tempo kind of Fort Hood kind of unit. Even my senior leaders, had spent the majority of their career, right? We'd been doing peacekeeping missions, right?
Yeah.
There wasn't this conflict. And so when I went to this unit, I quickly identified that I know where they're going.
Right.
Right? I had, my brothers were now downrange in Iraq.
Yep.
I was hearing the stories.
Yep.
I just got back from Afghanistan.
Yep.
I experienced what was going on.
Right.
I needed them to be ready.
You kind of knew how the enemy was fighting.
Yeah.
And what kind of tactics and what they were up against more than anybody in training can know.
And we would, before Afghanistan, we were still training old school, right? Out in the fields, out in the forests, doing everything. We now had to move to a mount position, right? We need to understand how to do warfare in cities, in towns.
In the urban
environment.
Yeah, right.
And so that's what I brought to my unit in Korea.
It becomes very psychological, at that point too.
Absolutely.
Sort of determining who's a friend and who's a foe.
Exactly. And everything's a threat.
Yeah.
Everything's a threat, right?
Right.
And so I brought that I put my application in basically to be the training NCO.
Yeah.
And I talked to my company commander. It's like, we need to do live fire exercises. We need to train with real ammunition. We have to do mount urban exercises. This is what we have to do.
Yeah.
Right? We need to make sure that these young kids know how to shoot these weapons, to know how to traverse between different weapons, right? Yeah. And so that became my kind of goal and mission in a unit in Korea that wasn't going to deploy to Iraq, right? But how do I get these kids ready to go once they redeploy back to the States? And we'll be going.
Right.
And that became kind of like my life's goal before I got out. And I think I did that very well. And I think, years later, thankful to kind of social media, I had one of my soldiers from Korea email me and said, "You set me up, thank you."
Yeah. Yep.
And kind of that became what I needed to do.
That's awesome. And now, kind of after your transition out of the service, You're now, working in a kind of consulting capacity.
Yeah.
How are you drawing from that time in your service?
Yeah.
And what you learned to be successful now?
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate. I work for a company called Deloitte Consulting, and I was drawn to work there because the work I'm doing is mission focused.
Yeah.
People always say, "Oh, you bleed green.
Yeah.
How are you out? How are you behind a computer?"
Yeah.
Right? And I tell people, I am still part of the mission.
Yep.
I'm just doing it from a different way now.
Yep.
And so the projects that I'm able to do directly supports the warfighter.
Yep.
And if it wasn't for that mission-oriented work, I
Yep.
wouldn't be here.
And I know that one of the projects that you're doing right now is taking a training all around the country
Yeah.
to help female veterans understand the services that are available for them,
Yeah.
how to connect with care,
Absolutely.
what a successful transition looks like,
Exactly.
even with challenges, how you overcome them,
Yeah.
and how you get engaged, in care at the VA or elsewhere,
Yeah.
and kind of get on a good track.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's very
Exactly. I mean, for me personally, the transition out the military, you lose your identity. And for me, that was hard, from whether, I was in for 5 years or whether I see people coming out after 20, 30 years. Of course, that transition is different, but I was whole, I was a jump master, I was all of this. I had everything right here, right? Stripping that and coming out as a civilian was very tough.
Yeah.
And so the program and the training that we're leading now really helps female veterans connect with the VA to help make that transition easier for them and to make sure that they know the resources that are available for them.
Yeah, so important. I mean, one of my big things as well is to help warriors realize that who they are as a warrior began often before they started in the military service, and it's about something bigger than just military service.
Absolutely.
Because they do feel sort of stripped naked for a time after they come out, but really going back and understanding who they are as a warrior and how that can apply in their life now is so critical.
Absolutely.
Any other thoughts as we wrap up? It's such a pleasure to connect with you and kind of hear some of these stories.
I think the time for me in the military set me up. The leaders I had in the military set me up for everything that I'm doing moving forward, right? Whether it's attention to detail, it's hard work ethic, starting from my dad to these men in the military. And so the stereotypes I see with women joining male units or the fact that men won't accept them, I am a living example of it going right.
Yeah.
I experienced it going right. And so I want more of those stories out there because it was a moment in my life that I will never forget, and I'm always thankful for.
Any advice as we wrap up for women who want to go after a combat role?
Yeah, do it.
Yeah.
Do it 100%. It's something that I know when I got out, it was really hard. It was a really hard decision for me to get out, but those opportunities were not there for me, right? Those roles weren't open to women at the time. If they had been, I'd still be in uniform today. If you have those opportunities to serve in that capacity, there are no excuses. Just do it.
Well, thanks, Nick, for coming in. It was really fun to talk to you.
Cheers.